Now, as the United Nations General Assembly meeting this week, President Cyril Ramaphosa, South Africa, wished to raise at least $100 billion in new investment in the country over the next 5 years. Now, President Ramaphosa said that South Africa wants to draw investors, and one of the challenges that African countries face is the need for development, but at the same time are weighed down by enormous debt, and this makes new investment all the more necessary. But what can be done is the question, I guess. To discuss these issues, we're now joined in studio by Dr. Charles Sinkala, who's the president of the World Native Identity Forum, as well as Dennis Mbakane, who's the president of the International Community Unifiers. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you, and good evening afternoon to the viewers.
Okay, so I don't know where to begin, really, to be honest, because both of you come with different interests and I suppose the betterment of the continent. The president is saying that we need to get investment. What do we do as a continent to attract this investment? What do we need to prepare on the ground? Perhaps let me start with you.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter. You know, one thing which we must prepare as nations in Africa is to make a conducive environment. Our policies as countries has to be well defined, and at the same time as we do that, we need also to build up the floodgates, you know, so that we only allow the certain type of investment which we need into these countries by involving the stakeholders, involving the legal fraternity, people who can read the fine prints and lines into the investment agreements, you know, also in terms of the borrowing of the money from the outside communities. You know, there are certain conditions which most African communities they overlook because of the site which they only look at receiving the money, and without also put into consideration many factors on how we can pay back the money to would-be investors who invest into that country. You know, I think it's very important also to understand that these investors, they would like a government which is stable so that their investment can be at peace. You know, and there's various issues and areas. So, and I'm glad that President Cyril Ramaphosa, you know, had mentioned this, you know, as he's fighting. I mean, he's coming from the business background. He understands the actual business that countries has to do business for them to sustain themselves. Otherwise, they'll suppress the citizens. They'll insert so much pressure in terms of taxes.
All right, so part of that challenge, of course, is to have a continent that's in harmony with itself. And I wonder if we're doing enough there so that we have one voice when these investors come to visit us.
Of course, yes. We have to have one voice, and especially to the treatment to those who are coming from outside. It has to be, they have to be welcomed, and then without any problem like xenophobia which is happening, because with the hatred we can't achieve. So we have to focus and doing the best, and then to welcome whoever comes to the country as a foreigner, and then to invest in the country so that it will make us to achieve all the goals which we want to achieve in the continent, in the country.
And part of that investment in the country does come from foreigners. If I think about a country like the United Kingdom that's got hundreds of nations represented there, America is by and large an immigrant nation. These are great powers in the world, and a lot of it has been built on immigrants that have come into certain countries. And I suppose instead of just looking for investment to come in terms of money to come, part of that investment is people.
Yes, that's true. And then that is what really we have to look at it and focusing, because really without foreign community, they can't, no, it won't move forward. You need a foreign person to advise, because the views are not the same. The look is not the same. So we need those to be a part of the investment in the country and then to move forward, yes.
All right. We are weighed down with a lot of debt. This is one of the challenges that continents have, and the countries on the continent have. How do we develop if we're paying off loans and trying to get, I guess, this investment to come through?
Yeah, You see, many nations in the Africa, countries rather, they have over-indebted themselves. You know, I'll tell you the name itself, aid. It's the actual meaning or the abbreviation of that. The full meaning is assistance in distress. So many countries has been living on that for many years. You can only be in distress for a certain period, and from there you must rely on self-reliance. You know, so many countries, they go to borrow money, they use it for other projects which they cannot even generate enough money to pay off the debt. And you must remember that being it bilateral debt or just debt from businesses, they require surety and certain things. So if you do not execute your part of the contract properly, then you expose the country into various uncertainties. And also it's also too much pressure onto the citizens, because maybe you might even raise the taxes or you raise the cost of living, which the economy gets affected. So the debt is, there's good debt which you have to use, and many countries have developed based on the debt. I mean, America is one of them who's living on the debt, Russia is living on the debt, and many other countries in the world. It's actually how you use the money, the one you are borrowing. You must remember the first thing that you have to pay back the money which you get in from other nations or business houses. The other thing is which avenues can we invest this money to? I mean, you understand that Africa is a vast community and vast continent. We host about 60% of arable land in Africa. So we can channel that money, invest into agriculture and produce, mass produce and export. You know, and I think at this time we need a will from all African nations to sit in one platform so that they can advise and find solutions to African problems. And in that way, then we'll have the economies going. I mean, some economies in Africa are doing very well. I was recently in Ghana. I mean, if you talk of the rate, the CD and the United States dollar, it's about 4.9, which is about 5. I mean, South Africa is 14. The other countries, it's actually more than that. It's because of the balance of the investment, the exports and the imports into the country. And I think in South Africa is doing very well. We have countries which are doing very well, you know, but we need that agenda to be for the rest of the continent.
All right, so getting back to the people and the movement of people, one of the challenges is there's this immigration which is great, it adds value, but there are also people that cross the borders that are not documented, and they put a strain on a country's resources and hamper development. How do we find a balance between those that are undocumented, that are perhaps economic migrants, and those that are properly documented, perhaps are refugees?
Yes, as international community unifiers, we do register all those whom are not documented on preparing them to see if we can negotiate for them to get documented. But also we face some problems on those whom are documented with the right documents. On traveling, you'll find that there is a problem with the immigrations on the port of entry. So those are the challenges which we face, of which those such issues they have to be addressed. So, but nevertheless, we can see in terms of those, even they are not documented, but they are doing something in the country. They are bringing the economy. They are producing. They are doing something, because when they are contracted somewhere, they will do the proper work on the right way. And then that's why we are saying, we as international community unifiers, we register them on a standby to say, after the negotiations are done, they can be documented in future.
All right, gentlemen, this is a topic we can discuss for a great length of time. Unfortunately, it's not on our side today, but for both of you, thanks very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us this day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we'll leave that.